Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football, continuing with our summer scouting, and we're talking about the Nebraska Cornhuskers. This is one of our favorite programs to talk about, not only on the podcast, but we've been exchanging a lot of text messages, a lot of calls, talking about this Nebraska football team. So excited to get into it. Now, before we get a chance, just want to say thank you to you guys. Just the support you guys have shown, especially the Nebraska fans, just has been absolutely awesome. Whether it's recruiting, whether it's the transfer portal, some of the best fans in the country. We were lucky enough to make it out to a game last year, and just phenomenal fan base. So shout out you guys again. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Without further ado, let's kick it off. And Dill, I'm going to ask you to just give a little state of the union on this Nebraska Cornhuskers football program.
I mean, I think they had one of the two best hires, and to
100%.
me, the two big dog coaches out there who have really proven it, and I have a lot of faith in being able to replicate now is Hugh Freeze and Matt Rhule. I mean, what Matt Rhule did at Baylor, taking that team over from where it was and in turning it into a team that was very much in that competition with the Oklahoma Sooners and Texas for that Big 12 title, nothing short of amazing. And the way he develops talent, second to none. Again, to me, that if they were going to make the hire they needed to make, it was him or Freeze, and they got the guy.
Yeah, I think me personally, probably throw Luke Fickell in that discussion as well. But I talked to a Nebraska fan the day of when they signed him, and he ecstatic, like he was absolutely thrilled. It does seem to be a perfect fit. Let's get into this team, this depth chart a little bit, and how they project into the 2023 season. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. You have a new quarterback, one in town, in Jeff Sims, a new offensive coordinator, and Marcus Satterfield. They'll start with the quarterback position. I mean, you and I are both on record being big fans of Jeff Sims.
Yeah, and to me, we don't even really know what Jeff Sims can be because he was stuck at a Georgia Tech program that, as much as he kind of made it look like they were getting it on track, that team just never had any traction. They never put anything around them. And he still managed to, like, manufacture yards, and they could move the ball a little bit. To me, I mean, he's coming to a Nebraska team that's far superior to what Georgia Tech was. Again, we talk about all the time. No idea how they've been losing the games they've been losing in the past 2 years. But he's coming into a team now that, again, I think they have the piece around him where he can kind of shine a little more than he could at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and I think Jeff Sims is a really good addition. I don't think it's a coincidence that they went after Jeff Sims hard in the transfer portal. You had a pretty good quarterback in Casey Thompson already on, but where Jeff Sims excels is, I think, perfect for what Nebraska wants to do. Marcus Satterfield wants to run the football. He wants to have two tight end sets, and he wants to use the play action. Jeff Sims is a phenomenal athlete extending plays, outside the pocket, throwing on a run. He has an absolute howitzer. I see a lot of success with Jeff Sims establishing the run game and then pulling play action, letting him be an athlete and push the ball down the field to some very athletic pass catchers, which is probably where I want to go next here. You bring in a guy like Billy Kemp, and I think he's a quarterback's best friend. He creates separation really, really early. Working in the slot, I think Billy Kemp's going to be phenomenal. And then Marcus Washington, let's get it going. This is a guy that I was pounding the table for about 12 months ago. A very inconsistent season last year, man. If he puts it together, I really do think this Nebraska offense can kind of take off a little bit.
Yeah, and in fairness, Marcus Washington, you look back, like, Nebraska was just an inconsistent offense. And Casey Thompson had, and it wasn't necessarily his fault because the offense gave him no help, but he had his moments of inconsistency too. So Marcus Washington's a guy who feels like if he can get it rolling, he's got the talent to be that guy. And he is the X factor. Like, you know what you have with Billy Kemp, just an ultra solid.
I don't know who the X factor is. Malachi Coleman.
That's definitely true. He's like the guy who I want to see him on the field, and I think he should be.
And I think he's gonna play. I mean, you have Billy Kemp, you bring in Joshua Fleeks, who Matt Rhule knows from his time at Baylor. He's a more veteran guy, but you have two guys in Marcus Washington and Malachi Coleman who are. I don't know if I call Malachi Coleman a lotto ticket. But as a true freshman, I don't know if you'll see many more impactful true freshmen in the country than a guy like Malachi Coleman with his size and elite track and field speed. You're asking Jeff Sims, who has an absolute cannon to push the ball down the field. Malachi Coleman, I could see kind of easily replacing what Trey Palmer was for that offense last year.
Especially because you really don't have anything on the team right now that should be in that Trey Palmer world where you can go hit 60-yard plays. consistently for what you expected, hitting 60-yard plays. And that was a big part of their offense, frankly.
If there was some success in that offense, it was Trey Palmer working vertically.
Yeah, and Malachi Coleman's probably the only guy on this team you look at like he's got that special sort of down the field ability. And again, I do think this offense in terms of pass catchers is ultimately going to run through these tight ends, though. It's like you got a guy in Thomas Fidone who again has obviously struggled with injuries, but there's a lot of potential there. I think Nate Borkshire, people like sleep on him because of Fidone and Eric Gilbert, but you saw him in the spring game. He looked really good. When he caught that ball up the seam and kind of ripped off a big play, that's like that difference making at tight end that you need, like to be able to catch the ball and run and move it the way he does. I'm kind of, again, those other two names are bigger names, if you will, in terms of talent and recruiting and expectations, but I'm looking for Borkshire to have a year.
Yeah, Eric Gilbert, we talked about it. If he reaches even 60% of his potential, he's going to be an all Big Ten kind of guy. But Thomas Fidone, have you seen pictures of him? I saw a picture of him I'm sure Nebraska fans know what I'm talking about. Picture with him next to Ndamukong Suh at the airport. And he literally looked the same size. This dude is big. He's athletic. Man, if he stays healthy, I think I'm with you. These tight ends are going to play a significant role. And you go back to Marcus Satterfield's time at South Carolina, that's what they did. They used a lot of those athletic tight ends to be playmakers in the passing game. I think you're going to see a lot of the same thing. And as a depth chart stands for what Satterfield wants to do, it's perfect to have some athletic freak show tight ends. And they'll get into the probably run game. I quickly go over it. I think Anthony Grant's phenomenal. I know he had some off the field stuff, but if he's ready to rock and roll, he's great. Gabe Ervin Jr., kind of a bulldozer. And then Ramir Johnson's a guy that I would like to see get back to that 2021 form. He was awesome and then just wasn't used last year. I don't really know why. The big X factor, if you will, for this offense, it is the offensive line, and the players are good. I like they brought in Ben Scott. I think Bryce Bernhardt's good. I think Turner Cochran's good. You just got to come together a little bit.
And they've had some injuries for sure at that unit, and I do think they're starting to fill the depth in. Those guys were young. Teddy Prohaska, younger player.
Yep.
Turner Cochran, younger player. They've been kind of a young offensive line, and it showed because they've had a lot of inconsistency and a lot of struggles. But again, you're right. There is a lot of talent. And again, you're getting the guy in Nordine newly back from suspension now. And if this unit just can play solid and give them what they need, you're looking at an offense that would just look totally different. Because again, they were so bad last year that there's just really not much Casey Thompson and Grant could do. And those guys are good players. And Jeff Sims is a really good player, but at the end of the day, if they don't develop here up front, then it's probably going to be a bit of a long season.
And I really do think bringing in a veteran like Ben Scott helps in a big way. Having a dude that can call out protections. He's played a ton of football coming over from Arizona State. That could really help. But at the end of the day, you got 6-7 guys who are gamers. They're Big Ten quality offensive linemen. Now it's time to put it together and see a little bit of development, which is what we've been saying all along.
That's Matt Rhule. Finally going to have an experienced group. It's felt like it's been we're young, we're going to get it rolling. Now it is time to it's got to get rolling now because these guys are heading into their second and in some cases third year starting.
Third, fourth year. You got to put it together at some point. Now,
got to get rolling.
The defensive side of the ball, again, head coaches are massive hires. I don't want to minimize the importance of hiring a good head coach, but I think coordinators are also extremely important at the college football level. I think they crushed it with Tony White. Watching that Syracuse defense over the last couple of years, it's chaos. It's controlled chaos. A 3-3-5. You have a lot of speed. You have a lot of athleticism on the field. And what I think is even more important is that the personnel fits exactly what Tony White wants to do. Dale, starting up front, there are some guys that you feel good about, but let's shout out the true freshmen first. Cameron Lenhart, Prince Will Yu. Those guys are going to play, and they're going to play a lot for Nebraska in 2023.
Yeah, and especially they got to replace Nelson now, and he gave them a lot. He was really the only guy who was consistently winning. O'Shawn Mathis, I think, never really got it rolling at Nebraska. No. And they got the shoes to fill in. And frankly, it's got to just get better. And you got Cameron Lenhart looked awesome in the spring game, first of all. you kind of hope one of those two step up and kind of become that pass rusher because again, you're kind of solid in the middle. It's like Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmaker are good players. Again, last year, like they were bad against the run, but with those two and maybe just some better coaching at the end of the day, better development.
Yeah.
What I'm kind of expecting out of a Tony White and Matt Rhule led team. I think he got the pieces. And again, it wasn't good enough last year. So like they gave up a lot of rushing yards, but you got some good young players. You got some transfers in Elijah Judy and Sherman and Chief Borders. I think you can take some step forward.
You're going to see it better. And I think if you have a better defensive line, like the linebacker play is going to be better. Like Luke Reimer, Nick Heinrich, they're phenomenal linebackers. You go back to the 2021 season all over the football field. What I want to talk about before we talk about the actual players is the personnel and how it fits, though. You're seeing a guy like MJ Sherman, who, again, former top 50 national recruit coming over from Georgia, fits exactly what Tony White, wants to do. Not Tony Elliott. We're not talking about the Virginia head coach. He sucks. Tony White. He's a guy that I can drop back in coverage. I can play off-ball backer. I can also be off the edge and be a pass rusher. That's what you're going to see in this Tony White defense. You're going to see a lot of multiple different formations, and you have guys like MJ Sherman, like Chief Borders. Elijah Judy can play all across the defense line, a guy that we didn't really mention yet. I think it's a perfect fit for what Tony White wants to do in terms of versatility in that front seven.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It is going to be a little bit more positionless, and you saw what Nebraska did in the past 2 years. It was base 4-3, and that's exclusively what they did. I don't think they put a ton of pressure on offenses, and frankly, it showed. It's like you just line up and run on them or do what you got to do, and that, frankly, it just worked. Like they didn't make adjustments. They just let teams kind of do what they wanted against them, and now, again, you got a package of players now, especially in the transfer portal and some of the recruits, of guys who can do some different things and just be a little more, again, put pressure on the offenses rather than always being kind of on your heels. And that's what it felt like. We're playing that really base defense and not deviating at all from it.
Now, going to the secondary, this is a group that I'm really excited. If you can get some pressure on the quarterback, you got a bunch of ballers in the back. Like Quentin Newsome, I think Buford's really good. Malcolm Hartzog, very, very good. Miles Farmer, this is a phenomenal back-end group. I will say one thing, and I'm very interested to see what Tony White does with this position, that rover position. Isaac Gifford, and we've talked about this a little bit. 2 years ago, Nebraska was spoiled with a guy like JoJo Domann, who was athletic enough to kind of play that nickel hybrid linebacker, where, he was a great linebacker. He was athletic enough to deal in space. Isaac Gifford's a good player. I don't know if he's athletic enough. I don't know if you want to see him kind of working against slot wide receivers. And so I'm kind of interested, and it just goes to coach to your personnel, coach to your players. They were putting him in just spots that's not who he is. I'm interested to see what Tony White does in that particular position with that particular player. But outside of that, this secondary.
I like what they did with Omar Brown when they had him in the nickel last year. That felt like kind of just a better chance. Gifford wasn't a good enough cover guy to do what they wanted him to do, but Omar Brown to me was a guy who kind of plays that hybrid role a little better, and he definitely doesn't have the size that Gifford has in terms of being like a linebacker, but I don't get the point of having three linebackers anymore. This isn't like the school Big Ten. These teams are spreading it out a little bit. If you're playing a team that can't throw like an Iowa.
You're playing Iowa or Minnesota. Yeah, that's where the Tony White defense fits perfectly. Okay, we need some more bigger bodies in the box. Okay, we can do that because we've coached to that. If you're playing a team like Ohio State and you need some more speed on the field, Tony White's versatility with the defensive scheme can also do that. That's kind of why I'm such a massive fan of what Tony White has done with this program. But the secondary is going to be one of the better groups in the Big Ten, Dill. I want to take a look at the schedule here because if we do like a win total, we'll talk about it. But just projecting Nebraska year one under Matt Rhule, I don't think it's crazy to say that they could win the Big Ten West because the Big Ten West is completely up for grabs here.
It's all in flux. And again, I will say this till I'm blue in the face. Nebraska, there's no reason they should have been losing 7-8 games like they have been in the past few years. 9 games in 21. But you have a talented team. Again, you look at like top to bottom, it's not a bad roster. It really wasn't for most of Scott Frost's tenure. It's just in-game management really bad, development not the best. And again, those are two things that Matt Rhule kind of thrives in. And he's coming into a solid team, didn't take a ton of transfers.
One other thing I'd say, sorry to cut you off. I see a lot of Nebraska fans who are just kind of fed up with the soft nature of Scott Frost, like never tackling. Spring game was stud. Matt Rhule, not only did they play a legit spring game, they were tackling quarterbacks multiple practices in the spring. And so that, like you saw when they played Northwestern, just flat. It was a team that, like, have you guys played tackle football, or were you guys just playing flag football all spring? I think you're going to see a little bit of a difference in the toughness as well of this team, because they've been tackling a lot and they stayed healthy too.
And frankly, that's all you need. You just need them to play the way they can play. Because like when Nebraska was cooking, like there'd be moments like, man, they're right in it with this Michigan team. They're right in with a Michigan State team. Played Ohio State really tough. Like there's the moments they look good enough. And again, it kind of did fall a little bit apart in 22. It's like if you go back there 21, where there's still a lot of guys on this team who played meaningful snaps in those years. Those guys can play with the rest of the Big Ten. It's just, can they do it game in and game out and not make horrible mistakes that cost them games, which is just like ultimately what they had going on for the past couple of years.
Yeah. Taking a look at the schedule, I believe the win total sitting at 6.5. I'm so excited for these first two games. And I think you look at the schedule, I think it's very reasonable to be going 4-0 with Michigan coming to Lincoln, right? On the road at Minnesota is a tough game. Minnesota is a very well-coached team. They do have a new quarterback. On the road at Colorado, apparently the Nebraska fans shut down the Colorado ticket sales with their action and just being all over the tickets. Minnesota, probably a toss-up game. I think they can beat this Colorado team. Northern Illinois and La Tech, if this team is as good as we think it can be, should be wins. And hard to give them a win against Michigan. But when you take a look at who they're playing in the Big Ten East, and then, of course, the Big Ten West, like on the road at Michigan State, very, very winnable. You have Maryland at home, also a very winnable team. I think you're looking at like maybe 3 or 4 games on the road at Wisco and Iowa to finish out, where that's kind of where the money's going to be made. That could turn this 6-6 team to an 8-4 team really quick. Dill, if you were to project the record here, how many wins is Matt Rhule getting under year one?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're missing out on Penn State and Ohio State. So those are like Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State right now are the hammers in the Big Ten. So they're not playing 2 of them. I think they can beat anyone in the Big Ten West. I think, frankly, the hardest team in that region might be, or side of the conference might be Illinois, who looks like they're going to have something going last year. Again, I'm not sure Wisconsin's going to be immediately, given all the changes they're trying to make. I'm not sure they're going to be like unbelievable this year.
Yeah, you're on the road. You're on the road at Illinois, on the road at Wisconsin, on the road at Minnesota, which is tough. And those are probably the teams that you're going to be battling it out for a Big Ten West championship.
Iowa's not going to be an easy game either, especially if Cade McNamara plays decent football. But
yeah, this is very excited for this team. I think 7-5, 8-4 is probably the range that I think this team is certainly capable of doing. I believe Vegas set their win total at 6.5, so probably like the over. But again, some tough games on the road. Really excited to see Matt Rhule under year one. And again, this program is under good hands. Appreciate you guys checking this out again. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.